I think I had a shirt similar in color the last time.
And all you need to do is look right into the screen, and I'll be off to the side asking
Okay.
a question. We have with us here today Bettie Marie Sharpton Daniels, and Bettie Marie is currently living in Cody, Wyoming. She, however, had her starts in Oklahoma. She was born, well, I'll let you cover that in Bettie Marie. Tell us a little bit about your background.
I was born in Ponca City, Oklahoma, in a garage that we were living in. And my mother wasn't about to have the hospital deliver me because she just read that some baby got switched. And she waited 10 years for me. She wasn't going to take any chances. So at 5 weeks, we moved to Cody because it was April when I was born on April 14th. I was born on Good Friday.
Okay. And then your parents were, who were your parents?
My parents were William Homer Sharpton and Edith Marie Sharpton. She was a Gamble Sharpton, and they were married in 24 in Oklahoma. They were both born in Indian Territory. My father was born in 1902 and my mother was born in 1906. And Oklahoma wasn't born until 1907. It was a late bloomer. And so they were both born in Indian Territory. And it was hard to get passports for them both. My mother's courthouse had burned up, and it was only because of her brother that she managed to get passports. But
something very special happened when you were 6 months of age, and at least I saw that on your book here. And you moved to Manitou Springs
at 6 weeks.
At the age of 6, in 1933.
In 1933.
At the age of 6 weeks.
Yeah.
And so 1933.
Because my father had a barber shop in Manitou.
Okay.
And so in the summertime, he cut hair, and at 50 cents a head, he said, and in the wintertime, he was a carpenter in Oklahoma. And my mother said, now we have a family, and whatever we're going to do it in one place. So where do you want to live? And he said, well, he guessed he'd live in Manitou.
And where did you live in Manitou at the time when you first moved?
When we first moved there, we lived in a little cabin on Waltham. And then we got up and we lived right past the loop is a bunch of steps that go up. We lived on that street. And that might be Waltham. I'm not sure because it's been so long since I lived in Manitou. But we lived right above those steps. And when I was 2, I was bound and determined I was going to go see my father by myself. So I took off down those steps, pretty long batch of steps for a 2-year-old. And I got almost to the bottom and I turned around and ran back up the steps as fast as I could go. And my mother was following me and she really had to hustle to get ahead of me. And I said, oh, Mother, there's the awfulest sound down there. It's just awful. So she said, well, let's go back down and see what it is. Well, it was a cricket. So we had to catch a cricket and see how they made the sound. And and my father's barbershop at that time was on that side of the street.
So it was on Manitou Avenue.
Yeah, it was on the loop.
Okay.
And there's a little shop there that has a lot of camping equipment or something.
That would be Mountain Man.
Okay, well, that's where it is now.
Where
But
the shop was
he had a
located.
barber shop there.
Okay. There's a restaurant across the street, and there's some shops. The Loop is directly across the street from where your father's
And the
barber shop
owners
is
of the Loop
located.
were very close friends of my folks.
And so your earliest memory, perhaps, is the memory involving the steps.
Well, it's one of the earliest. And then we bought that house when I was 3. So from the time I was 3 till I got married and moved away in 59, I lived in one house, one church, one school building. It was grade school on the bottom, music department and junior high on the middle side, and the snooty high school kids, seniors, until I became a senior, and then we weren't snooty anymore.
We all were under the same building.
All in the same building.
That's right, on Pawnee Avenue.
Because we didn't have when we graduated, that was the largest class we'd ever had, and we had a girl move from the lower grade lower than us into our class, and so we were 25, and we got 2 scholarships that way.
Now, I noticed on that building, on the side entrance, that there are 2 doorways. One is labeled boys, and the other one is labeled girls. Uh, now, tell us a little bit about that. Was that actually, were separate entranceways actually used by the boys and girls?
I don't think they were really used that much. I remember going in both of them, so I don't know.
Who are some of the teachers you remember?
Well, my favorite teacher was in the 3rd grade, and it was Miss Everett. And after she retired, she became Mother Hubbard at the North Pole. And then she got married really late in life, and they toured around and showed travel films. But she was great, and when she marched us out every morning, we brushed our teeth.
And do you remember a teacher by the name of Professor? He was.
Oh yes, Prof.
Tell us about Prof.
He was
What was his name again?
It
was
Richardson.
Richardson. That's right, Professor Richardson. That's correct.
And I think his name was James, but I'm not sure. We didn't ever talk to anybody about first name. I mean, you didn't dare call a woman by her first name.
Now you realize they named a stadium after him too. The football field where the Mustangs currently play is the Richardson Field.
Well, he was very, very famous. And when we were talking about Kiwanis, I was usually helping serve. And I'd bring him coffee, and he'd do everything he could to make me spill it.
I hear he was everyone's favorite teacher.
He was a good teacher. My husband went to school there in twice. Once was, I think, in the 3rd grade, and once was in the 6th grade. And he was the 6th grade or the 7th grade. I can't remember. I want to think he was high school, but.
Do you remember any stories? Do you know of any stories about Mr. Richardson at the high school?
No, I don't. He did a lot of boys' activities,
He was involved in some kind of accident, wasn't he?
Oh,
there was an accident.
I don't know. That must have been after I left.
See, your father was a barber, and he was a town barber, I would assume. But I understand too, your father, Homer, was very active and.
Oh, he was active in everything.
What kind of things did he do?
Well, when he quit being a barber and a carpenter, he helped build Camp Carson. And my father-in-law and my father were both carpenters on Camp Carson. And when they built that, and then after that, he quit being a contractor, and he went to work for the music store over in town. And what was it called? Can't remember. He worked in the morning there. He cleaned the building before he got there early and cleaned the building and everything. And then he worked mornings in the store. And then he worked afternoons on commission and went to people's houses and sold them appliances and things like that.
So you mentioned that he sold real estate.
He was always a salesman. When I was born, he was working 3 jobs. He was selling insurance for nickel policies. He was selling vacuum cleaners, and he was selling something else. And so he was always a salesman, and he was a good salesman. I never liked that job, but he did. And then he went into real estate probably about the time I was in high school.
Okay. Do you remember any of the buildings he was involved with and selling?
Almost every building in Manitou, he's sold it. He'd drive by and say, well, I sold that building 3 times, sold that building twice, and very honest, very liked by everybody.
That's what I understand. Was he ever involved in Manitou politics?
Oh yeah, he was the mayor one term. He was on city council several times. When I was about 16, I went in front of the city council, which was really spooky. Even though he was part of the city council, those men were spooky because I was just 16. And I was asking for the pop booth for the 2 square dances on Tuesday night and Friday night. And out of the goodness of their heart, they let me have it, and I had to clean the whole building every Tuesday and Friday, or Wednesday and Saturday, and then I always ordered the pop and the candy bars and everything, got it iced down, and then out of the goodness of her heart, my mother sold pop for me so I could square dance. Took me 20 years to figure that one out. I was not very smart sometimes.
Okay, so he had served as both a council member and the mayor. Do you recall when he was mayor or sat on the council?
Oh,
I've got his, the 40s, maybe the 50s.
I wrote his history up, and I am not sure.
What were some of the big issues confronting those city councils? Do you have any?
I don't know, but I know when I went to one of the class reunions, and we never had a class reunion. We always had a school reunion when we started finally having them. And Alvin Lampfair, I think he's dead now, but he was the master in some ways. And he said, the people on the city council tell me that Manitou is much better now than it was when we were in it. But remember, when we were in it, we had 2 doctors, a dentist, 5 grocery stores, 3 of them delivered to your house. We all delivered. We had 5 filling stations. They would all wash your windows and check your oil. And it's better now. We don't have any of those.
Wow.
So it's really changed. It's just a bedroom community now, more or less.
Yeah, it really has grown too.
Well, when I was there last time, which I think was in August last year, I called Terry and told him that Karen and I would be down in Manitou the next morning for soda water. Would he like to come and have coffee with us? And so he sent me to the Red Dog or something across from the.
That would be the Red Dog. That's where I go with Bettie Marie.
And I was shocked at all the young kids in their hiking clothes and
yes.
And they don't have jobs evidently. They were there at 10 o'clock in the morning having coffee. But Terry came and made it best there. Yeah, I was surprised at how many people were there and how much things have changed and grown.
Well, it sounds like there was tremendous growth during the time your father served on council.
There was. That was kind of it was really active in the 20s when everybody brought their trunks and their hat boxes and paraded up and down the streets from one spring to another spring. And then they'd go down to the park and they'd play shuffleboard. And they had clubs of their state. So they'd have a Kansas club and an Oklahoma club and a this and that and the other, and play each other all summer long. And it was different then, but it was growing then. And then of course the depression hit, and that was hard on everybody. Manitou probably did better than some. And then during the war, they had victory gardens every place. And that little piece of property that became the Masonic Temple was taken over by a little guy, a little Mexican guy that lived way up at the top above the spa. There's steps that go way up there, and he lived in one of those last houses up there. And he had the most wonderful garden over there, grew everything and sold it, and scooted all the snakes out of the way so they wouldn't get hurt. And I said, kill them, because I hate snakes. But he had them all around and everything was fine.
What businesses do you remember from those days? We're talking about the 30s and 40s.
Businesses that we went to, well,
yeah,
there was 2 drugstores. Okay. There was Pitcock's and there was Skiffington's.
Skiffington's, okay.
And Skiffington became our senator, and he wrote the opening for my book.
Where did you go? What businesses did you patronize back in those days?
I
The candy store? Or?
no, I never got to go to. I was pretty protected.
Okay.
So all the teenagers went to Patsy's, but I or there in the what do you call that?
The arcade?
The arcade, yeah. But I never got to go there after school. I had to go straight home, and and I worked at Killam's Cafe all the time.
Where was Killen's?
It was right next to the library in that little building right there. I don't know what's in it now.
I think it's some kind of trading post now. It's a commercial.
Yeah, that was Killam's Cafe.
Okay.
And a lot of gals worked at the Stagecoach Inn, but I worked at Killam's Cafe, and I worked breakfast and lunch, and then I could square dance every night, because there were square dances on the west side, there were square dances at the Broadmoor Hotel, there were square dances and the Broadmoor School had a square dance team that toured Europe. Well, we were just as good. We didn't have the connections or the money, but we were just as good.
Well, you mentioned your father, Homer Sharpton, as a member of council. He served also as the mayor of Manitou. What service organizations was he involved with?
He was really involved in the Kiwanis and the Masons and the Shrine Club. I don't know if he belonged to any others. I don't think we had an Elks or an Eagles.
Church.
Yeah, he was superintendent of the school, of the church forever. And my mother was a teacher.
Which church was it?
The Congregational.
On Pawnee Avenue.
Mm-hmm.
What role did he play with the Kiwanis?
Well, he became president, and then he went on up and became lieutenant governor of the state. So he was involved in everything in the town, really. Mm-hmm. And he's got a tree in the park. Mm-hmm. It's been replaced once.
I think I've seen that.
Yeah, it's right across from the spa.
Okay.
And it died, and they had to replace it. And it was growing good last year. And then he was very instrumental in getting the 7-minute spring were active again. And he and Mother both had their name in the middle of it, but now I understand it's gone. And Terry told me they were going to put it in the.
We'll cover the Springs here in a moment, but a little bit more about your father. And you mentioned he also was a member of the Masonic Lodge.
He built the Masonic Lodge.
And you lived across the street.
And we lived across the street from it. He knew that the city owned that lot. The city didn't know they owned it. They didn't pay any attention to it. So he looked it up and figured out what they had in it, and he offered him a price and said, we want to put a Masonic temple there. Because the Masonic temple was on the 3rd floor above the drugstore. And they had to haul all the food up, they had to haul all the coal up, they had to haul everything up those steps, 3 floors. And the women always had their beautiful formals and everything, and they'd go up and fix all the dinner they could, and then they go home and change their clothes and come back and go back up those stairs again. And there was no place to park, it was just on the street. And so you just took your luck and hoped you got to park.
What fundraising activities was the Kiwanis involved with back in those days? Were they doing Huck Finn days and things like that?
I don't remember anything like that.
I know more recently they had Huck Finn days and spaghetti dinners.
And they've always had spaghetti dinners and pancake dinners and pancake breakfasts and things like that. I don't remember what they did, and I really didn't pay any attention.
Did you?
Yeah, this was.
What do we have there?
Well, it's a little trophy for. I'll show it up here.
Yes.
It's a little trophy for the Shrine Club.
Oh.
And it's a copy of the statue that's over at the Shrine Club.
No, this is the Colorado Springs Shriners.
He bought an old school and he made it into the Shrine Club. And he was always thinking about the future. And he really wanted to have a caretaker there because it's on a busy street, and it's
Now, where was that?
Yeah, it still is.
Oh, yeah, it's like El Paso and 33rd or something like
Yeah,
that.
something like that. Close to Safeway, only on El Paso Boulevard.
Okay.
And this
So
is,
that was given to him because of the service.
oh, he put 36 kids from Colorado in the Saline Hospital and got them all paid for, every bit of them. The families didn't ever have to pay anything.
Wow.
So he personally put 36 kids in the hospital. And he's visited every crippled children's hospital there is, I think. One in Hawaii, and he visited a lot of Lions Club's hospitals because he felt a lot about, and he was very active in the Shrine Club and I think he went both ways. So he was a Knight Templar and he was whatever the other one is. But he bought this old school they were closing down, and then he built it into the Shrine Club, and then he was trying to save enough money so that he could build a little apartment in the back, and he could hire a caretaker. And the Shrine Club's main facility, whatever you call their main place, is in Pueblo. And when they somehow found out that he was hoarding money, they swooped in and took it. But they have a room still in the Shrine Club, the Sharpton room, and then the Masonic Temple had a room for him too.
Well, it sounds like he was certainly involved in
He was
several
involved
community
in
activities,
everything.
as well as the government of Manitou Springs.
Yeah.
Roughly what, between in the 30s, 40s, and 50s? It sounds
Well,
like.
plumb up till the 80s. He moved that little TB building that belongs to the Miramont Castle.
Mm-hmm.
He moved it from down the street. He got Louis Kahn to help him, and they moved it over there to that. He was always thinking of the Miramont Castle too, because my mother was so involved in it, and he said they've got to have more parking, so they got that empty lot and made it into a parking place.
And you mentioned your mother. What is your mother's name again?
Edith Marie.
Okay. And so your mother was involved with the Miramont Castle. What kind of things did she do?
She and 7 other women bought a condemned apartment house when my father was a real estate salesman and had never had a penny of debt since 1939. And he didn't like that idea very well.
Mm-hmm.
So they bought it, and one apartment at a time, they turned it back to its original. They researched and turned it back to its original.
I seem to recall that was around 1972.
It was in the 70s, I know.
Okay.
And then she stripped paint, and every apartment was. I think there's 7 apartments in it, and my husband's family lived on the top floor twice, and he was hired to go take care of the furnace down the staff steps, because there's from the top apartment down to the furnace is a staff entry or exit or whatever you call it. And so he went down there twice a day and took care of the furnace. Once, I think, well, they weren't too far apart. They moved out and then they moved back. And Nia told me, that's my mother-in-law, she told me that she saw Josephine's bed in that center apartment. Josephine from Napoleon and Josephine.
Okay.
It was there. And then by the time they bought it, it wasn't there. So we don't know what happened to them. A lot of the slats on those railings going up the stairs, they were used for firewood.
Oh, goodness.
It was really bad. And she'd strip the paint and the wallpaper off in little holes, little cubby holes and stuff, and finally brought on her asthma. So then she couldn't go up and down the stairs anymore. So she'd keep making jelly and jams and cookies and candy and things to sell in the gift shop to help them more. But for about 6 or 7 years, she worked up there a lot.
Do Do you recall any of the founding members of the Miramont Castle besides your mother? She obviously was a big
There
part
was
of it.
Shirley, somebody, and her husband, but I can't remember her name.
Surely.
I don't. They're not here anymore. They moved away, and I can't remember who all there was. I'm sure they have records.
Did you ever hang out at the castle back in those days
Oh,
when it was being converted to?
Well, I was married and gone.
Okay.
You know, I left in '59,
That's right.
and I was in Grand Junction for 3 years, and then I was in LA. That's a long ways away.
Well, let's talk about your direct involvement with Manitou, and we know you were active in
I
the
wrote
Manitou Springs
the
Foundations.
first book on Manitou Springs history.
Yes.
I went to the library to see if I could check out a book for the Girl Scouts, and they didn't have one.
And for those of you who can't see this very well, it says The Springs of Manitou. This is authored by Bettie Marie Daniels and Virginia McConnell, and it's published by Colorado Booklets.
And the funny part is, it's published by Alan Swallow, who lived in Denver. And I later found out he was raised in Powell, which is 30 miles from here.
So I see the date on this book at 1964. Is this available still in the bookstores or anywhere?
When Alan Swallow retired, he sold the plates to Miramont Castle. So it's had 7 printings.
Okay.
But I don't know if it's still, Miramont Castle has written their own book now.
All right.
So they'd rather sell it than this one. They may never print it again. We'll see.
So were you involved with the founding of the Manitou Springs Foundation?
No, that happened
That happened yet?
long after I left. But I was involved with doing a big spring day with all the springs, and we're all in costume, old costumes, and I had somebody at every spring doing something. There was weavers and singers and all kinds of people, and they all had their costumes on, and you could go from one, there was a map, and you could go from one spring to the other, and I had them all analyzed for content.
For content?
And Terry's done that several times recently.
Right. I've seen that. So you perhaps were one of the first leaders in the community to
I think I was.
actually take an interest in
Because I don't
determining the
think they
content
cared.
and everything
Yeah.
else.
Yeah, and they changed a lot. For instance, Wheeler Spring, which I used to like really well, now goes into a cistern and sits for a while. And then it isn't as good.
So you were doing these tours up until the time you married and left Manitou.
Yeah.
59. And what's your recollection of the springs? Did you have any favorite tasting springs?
Well, I liked them all, but I had Ron. Did you do this? I liked them all. I really liked Wheeler first, and now I don't like it at all. I never got to taste the one at General Motors for many years. And finally, when I got a taste of that, I really liked it. But now, and that's the one I get. It's the one that's now by the bank, or by what used to be the bank.
Yeah, that's isn't that
Shoshone?
Shoshone, okay.
I think.
And then for those who don't know about the General Motors plant, there was a General Motors testing facility in Manitou at one time.
Yeah, took all their cars up Pikes Peak to test them out.
Do you have any recollection of that testing facility?
Well, it was all very hush hush and secret, but once in a while, and they had the cars all covered up so you couldn't tell what they were going to look like. But once in a while, you got a peek at them, and that was fun. But they went up the mountain. I had good friends that went up the mountain. Louis Unser was a really good friend of my father's. And
Did you meet him?
oh, many times.
No kidding.
Many times. And then both of the Sanborn twins, I went to school with it. Their sister was my valedictorian.
Would that have been Frank Sanborn?
Frank and Nick.
Nick, that's right, okay.
Nick put in that car museum.
Yes, and then his think it's his son, Don Sanborn, who's involved with that museum now.
Oh, is it open?
Yeah, it's
Oh.
over. Well, it's now over at the Broadmoor. It's the Pikes Peak Hill Climb Museum and Hall of Fame.
Hmm.
And Don Sanborn's cousin, Lisa Haight, is also involved with that project.
Well, Frank and Nick both died, and too young, and Rosie, which was my valedictorian, she died a couple of 3 years ago, and they're all buried in Woodland Park because they were raised in Cascade.
Did Lewis, or excuse me, did Lewis Unser ever give you a ride in any of his cars?
No.
No.
But I've been in his garage. Yeah, I've been in his garage. He lived in Cascade too.
Okay. That must have been pretty exciting.
It was exciting, and we'd get on those corners up halfway up Pikes Peak and watch them come around, and they'd slide around everything. And of course, everything was all gravel then. The whole road was gravel, and we never had stock cars like they have now. We just had race cars.
Yeah, a lot of them are becoming electric cars. It's starting a lot of electric cars.
And going up the peak with them?
Going up the peak with them.
Well, that tests them.
They're under 10 minutes now.
My grandson runs up Pikes Peak. I walked up it, but I don't run up it.
So has he run in the Pikes Peak Marathon?
Yeah, he runs in several of those. I don't know which ones.
And what's your grandson's name?
William Vogel.
William Vogel. Okay. Does he live in Manitou?
No, he's a firefighter for the Tri-Lakes, Monument Lake, Palmer Lake, and another lake, I don't know. And he lives out in Woodland Park, in the Black Forest. And he raises meat sheep and eggs. They have 150 chickens every year, at least. And then he has 3 greenhouses, and he raises things and goes to the farmer's market.
Yeah, we were talking a little bit about the Springs, and you conducted tours. Just curious, how many springs did you have on your tour?
Well, we had 16.
Okay, 16 public springs.
Yeah,
Okay.
but Manitou never owned them. They own the Wheeler Spring, and I think and the 7 Minute Spring now, but I don't think they own any of them for a while.
Well, they seem to be acquiring some of the rights to these springs.
Oh, good.
So there's been probably a lot of great progress in preserving our springs.
Well, Terry would know that.
Yes, he would.
I don't. I don't anymore. I'm long lost from that. It's been so long since I lived in Manitou Springs, and Manitou will always be my hometown. But there's 6 military bases in Colorado Springs, and the traffic is terrible.
That's right. And then for the viewers who don't know it, Bettie Marie was referring to Terry Sharpton, her cousin, and he's involved as the president of the the Middle Springs Foundation in Manitou Springs. And he's kind of carried on your tradition.
Good for him.
You feel like you had an influence on him.
Probably. Yeah.
I gotta ask,
Yeah, that my cousin was Robert, and he came out because my folks lived there. He got tired of Oklahoma too. And I have another cousin that came out and lived over by the Flying W, and loved Wyoming, hated Colorado. I said, why? So she's back in Oklahoma now. She lost her husband, and she thought she could live close to her daughter there, but it didn't work out. She's back there, and I said, I don't know why you like Oklahoma so much. It's got chiggers, it's got snakes, it's got humidity, it's got everything that I don't like. But those Okies get it in their blood.
Well, I don't know what it is about Manitou, but it seems to draw people from all over the region.
I think it does.
There's a lot of people who transfer from other parts of of the country. They presently live in Manitou, and it seems like no matter who moves there, they have this urge to become actively involved in our community.
Good.
Um,
That's what they should do
our
when they
community
move
is
there.
built on volunteerism
But
for the
the
most
things
part.
that I hate the most is when people move from someplace else to your town and then want to change it just like they had before.
Right, that's right.
You know, you move there because it's different and you like that. And then you want, no, I like it back there. Let's make our new town like our old town. That's not right.
No, that's not right. That's right. I could never do that. Nobody listens to me anyway. So, but no, in all seriousness, let's talk a little bit more about the high school and as well as the middle and elementary school. They were all located in the same building on Pawnee. And we talked a little bit about some of the teachers. We talked about Mr. Richardson. How about some of your classmates? Who do you remember? We know somebody you know, but
Yeah,
that's Shirley Wade.
Shirley Wade.
Yeah, you and Shirley graduated from the same graduating class in
That's right.
1951.
That's right. Don Moses was in my graduating class. He always claimed the class above me, but he was in mine. And Joanne Zerby was a real good friend of mine. She's Joanne Steves, and now she's in California. But she lived there for a long time. The gal that stood up for me when I got married is Sally Ali, and she's lived in Alaska for 50 years, but she just moved to Seattle. So I think she's crazy, but her oldest son lives there.
Who else do you remember from those days? How about them Murray sisters?
Yeah, I remember them.
Okay.
And Jane Hart. Can't remember what her name was, but.
So what kind of crazy things did you do as a student? Was there any pranks you might have pulled on people or anything you're willing to admit to?
Well, I always had a boyfriend every year.
Okay. Every year?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, wow.
Never went on a date till I was 16, but I had a boyfriend. And the first year I had Jack Chick. His father was the principal. And at church, he went over and bought a little sterling silver and enamel. It wasn't a butterfly, it was a dragonfly at a white sale at the church. I think he paid either a nickel or a dime for it. And I've still got it. It's beautiful. I can't remember who my second grade boyfriend was, but my third grade boyfriend, I can't remember him either. But I can sure remember he talked me into putting my tongue on the flagpole.
Really?
And it stuck there.
During the winter?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then my fourth grade boyfriend run me into the side of the building and chipped my tooth.
Ooh. Did he last after? What did he last?
Oh,
as
they
a
never
boyfriend
lasted.
after that? They never lasted.
It was just in my head. They probably didn't even know they were my boyfriend. The dumbest things I used to do
Okay, let's hear the dumbest things.
is if you come out on that second floor,
Yeah.
there's a wall and you can climb up on that wall that's around the patio thing. And then it's straight down about 15 feet to the concrete. But if you go along that wall, then you can jump over the stairs and land on a sloping grass. If you're lucky, you can stay on it. And I was good at that. I did it all the time. Luckily, my mother didn't know that.
Well, that's good. Now, you never got hurt, did you?
No,
Okay.
but I was lucky. I was a real tomboy all my life. I loved to climb, and I always had two or three boys that did what I wanted to do. Then the girls wanted to do what I wanted. They wanted to go to the Coke shop and sit there and talk, and I didn't want to. I couldn't do that. So I'd always have two or three boyfriends, and they'd do things I wanted to do. So I'd go and build a house in the trees, and my mother would read a magazine, and we'd climb and do all kinds of things. And she'd take us up Queens Canyon or Downs Queens Canyon. And then one day I remember she got us all over that fence, and it comes up there and then it comes back this way, and it's um, barbed wire. And somehow, I think there was 4 of us, me and 3 guys, and she got us all over the fence, and we just got inside the Queens Canyon, and the caretaker came over and found us. So she said, sit down and I'll go talk to them. So she went over and talked to them, and then she said, now we can go hiking up the trail. Okay, why didn't we walk in the front door and do that? And then I climbed Kissing Camels 3 times, and that was very illegal back then.
You climbed the Kissing
I
Camels.
sat in the hole.
Oh my goodness.
Yep, 3
Weren't you
times.
scared?
No, it was just an adventure. My mother was with me and 3 boys.
Did you use any climbing equipment, ropes or anything like that?
No, I don't think we knew how to do that.
Okay. But you knew how to
And you
climb
can't
it.
go up the stairs that are carved there, because then you can't get into the holes. You need to go on the sides. And then the last time we went up, my mother said, everything has changed since the last time we were here. We're not coming up again. And now, of course, they climb it all the time. But then it was really illegal.
Mhm. So, where did kids hang out after school?
Down at Shipwrights.
What was that?
It was just a cafe, I think, but they always had Cokes and things like that, and everybody hung out there. I didn't get to. Mother wouldn't let me.
Mhm. Why is that, Bettie Marie?
I'm an only child, and she waited 10 years for me.
Okay, fair enough. So Shipwrights, was it, or
Shipwrights.
Shipwrights? No,
And there
where
was,
that?
it was in the arcade,
Okay.
and they lived on Grand Avenue, and I lived on Grand Avenue after I was married. That's the first place we bought, was the end of Grand Avenue. And Louise was my age, and then the older one, do you remember her name? Lived next door to us.
Who lived next door to it?
No, across the road from them.
King lived next door.
Can't remember her name. Anyway, she was older. She was probably 3 or 4 years older than me. A real old woman.
So you live right around the corner from Shirley. Shirley lived near the Cliff House, a couple doors up on Canyon.
Yeah,
So you lived at the end of
but that
Grand.
was after I got married.
Okay.
And Shirley may not have been there by that time.
Okay.
I think Shirley left shortly after she graduated.
Yeah, I live up on Spencer Road.
On where?
On Spencer, off of Spencer.
Where's that?
Dudley Road, up in there, on Agate Hill, I guess. You might know it's Agate Hill.
Agate Hill. Up above the Cliff House?
Right above you, right above Grand.
Oh, okay. I live below Maple Willie
That's right.
and all those, yeah.
I know that house. That's a very nice house.
And Foster and Skippington was a classmate in the class above me, and Jan Elridge, that helped with all the get-togethers, the school reunions. She lives in Pueblo now. She was a grade below me, I think, or maybe in my grade. Don't remember. But I didn't get to go hang out with the kids.
Okay.
I had to go home.
Was there anything else you can recall about
Well,
those early days?
I started to tell you about Bertha,
Okay.
that owned the pottery place, Van Briggle. She and her husband owned Van Briggle. When we went to school, she was the violin player and I was a violin player, and she was much better than me. But our senior year, she moved to Colorado Springs so she could be in the symphony. And so then I was concertmaster.
So you played with Bertha Stevenson, who owned
Who owned
Van Briggle.
Van Briggle. She was a great violinist. She was still playing violin.
Oh, wow.
I graduated from high school. I put it in a case and I never touched it again. I did that for my mother, and I don't need to do that anymore.
Wow.
But you can do the,
Yeah, I can play the piano.
You
still.
play piano. What other instruments do you play?
I had a lot of voice lessons.
Ooh. Maybe afterwards we can do a duet together.
You're better off listening to him. He plays the guitar.
Cool. Okay, well, can you think of anything else?
Well, I had a horse, and nobody else in town did, really. And I had it in a horse pasture. Now, before they built the swimming pool, the old Midland Terminal grade went through that, and then it went out into a big pasture, which now would be under the road,
Right.
because now there isn't any big pasture beyond it. But and we somehow acquired that pasture, and I had a Morgan. His name was Pretty, and he was beautiful. And my father spent hours trimming his mane to make it arch just so, but he never rode it once. He didn't like a horseback ride. My mother did. And so then the snakes would get so bad, the water snakes, and they none of them were really poisonous, but I hated snakes so bad that I quit feeding my horse. I just wouldn't do it. So I brought my boyfriends, 2 or 3 of them, down, and they would kill them and toss them up to me, and I'd put them in a pile. And then Jimmy Burkapile was my current boyfriend at that time, but Billy Schumard was there, and I can't remember who else. And Jimmy had this snake, and he said, "Now you have to hold this for me. I want to take it to science class." I said, "No, I'm not holding that snake." And yeah, he said, "Okay, chicken, you hold it by its tail." So I'm holding it by its tail, and its tail fell off. And the snake's running around my feet. And I went screaming to someplace. When we finished, we had a huge pile of snakes. I mean, there was on the road, they were a huge pile of snakes. So then I could go feed the horse for a while till we got more snakes. There was always plenty. But now you can walk that beautiful trail along that old railroad
Creek
trail.
Wall Trail, yes, it is nice.
That's the old railroad track.
Mhm. That's right. And God, when was that taken out? Do you recall? It probably had to be that.
It was
49.
taken out.
I think it was 49 when they.
Yeah,
when
I
they
think it
closed
was.
the Midland.
Mhm. And I had another horse. After that one, I had another horse. And we went to an auction and bought it. And my boyfriend, who I later married 2.5 years later, he rode it home from Colorado Springs to Manitou. And he kept saying, "It's so little, my feet are dragging the ground." But it wasn't quite that little, but it was little. And one day it got loose and it was running and running and running. And I looked up and it was running across the trestle just as fast as it could run. Never missed a step, but I was scared to death it was going to break a leg.
Was this the trestle? Was this the trestle above Ruxton?
No, it was the trestle. I think it was above, in close to where Shirley lives. What's that subdivision?
Oh, yeah, that would be Crystal Hills.
Yeah, I think it was someplace over there. I could just see it because I'd been chasing it for a long time, and then he got away. He went straight across the trestle and didn't bother him at all.
So, not to get off track about Manitou, but what kind of things were you also involved? I understand you were also involved with the development of the museum. Just involved with your work for the Cody Museum?
Oh yes, I have. I was on the board for the new Cody Museum, which is a little museum, but we have the Buffalo Bill Historical Center, which is 350,000 square feet, 5 museums under one roof, and it's a partnership with the Smithsonian.
Wow.
Yeah, it's 5 museums. It's got the largest gun museum, and it was just remodeled. So all the things my husband used to hang, that was the last little bit that was there. He hung gun sprays and all kinds of things for everybody to see. And now it's totally changed, and it's bigger, and it's something else. And then they have the art museum. Used to be just Western art. Now it's all kinds of Western art, new and old. Then it has the Plain Museum, and my husband did bring the teepee in for that, and built the models, horses and models, and dress them and everything. They're still there, but that's about all. And then it has the Buffalo Bill Museum, and then it has the Natural History Museum. Now, he never got to see it. That's my favorite, is the Natural History Museum. It's all the flora and fauna of the Yellowstone ecosystem. And he got to see the plans for it, and he was really excited about all the maintenance things they were putting in that he'd been begging for. But he never got to see the museum.
Did you tell about your Girl Scout experience?
No, I didn't touch on that.
70 years.
I've been in Girl Scout for 74 years, and I'm a life member, so I have to die to get out of it. But I'm the president of the Itaquana. But I started as a Girl Scout with my mother being my leader. And then when I became a senior Girl Scout, which would be high school, GSUSA passed a new rule that said a parent could not be a leader. They thought it was better if somebody else would be a leader. Well, we couldn't find anybody else to be a leader, so 20 some of us had to quit. Then after I got married, I came down from the ranch in about a year, and then I started helping with outdoor training, camp skills, how to pitch tents, how to build a fire, how to cook, how to do all those things. And we did it at Hamp Hut, which used to be in the Garden of the Gods. And Mrs. Hamp had built it for the Girl Scouts and given it to the Girl Scouts, but now it's vanished. They tore it out.
Where was that in the Garden of the Gods?
Well, when you come up from, what's the gift shop called?
Yeah, that would be the outpost, I believe.
Yeah, when you come up from that, if you turn, there's another little road that I don't think anybody goes down it, but it's there. And that went to Hamp Hut.
And it's called the Hamp Hut.
Hamp Hut.
H-A-M-P?
That was her name.
Okay.
And I did all kinds of outdoor training there. And then when my oldest daughter became 6, she got to be a Girl Scout. And then I became a leader. And then I was a leader, and then we went to Grand Junction, and I was on the board of that council. We had 5 councils in Colorado and 1 council in Wyoming. And my second book that I wrote was the history of the Wyoming Girl Scout Council. But all those burned up in the Casper Scout House. Somebody set a fire in there, and the extra copies were in it. And then, so I was a leader and a service unit chairman and a board member. And the Girl Scouts owned 6 horses and borrowed one for the leader every time. So I wrangled horses a couple of days a week and took girls on horseback rides. And my kids, Ron and his big sister, had to sit there and play in the sand. Well, I had my little one in front of me on a pillow, and we went out for an hour here, and I'd usually have 2 hours a night.
Do you still ride horses?
And no, I have 2 artificial knees and an artificial hip, and I can't get on them very well. I did until then, but
Well, are there any
he rides for me.
are there any parting words you want to say to the people back home in Manitou Springs?
Well, you're very lucky to be there. It was a wonderful place to grow up. I had my own private little church. The freeway came along between it and that. And the big rock above my father's house, it started to slide one day. And it slid 18 inches, I think, or something. And they brought the engineers from Fort Carson, and then they got engineers out of the Wind River Canyon in Wyoming and brought them down, and they worked and worked to tie it to the rest of the rock face. And when they blasted the freeway through, my mother said she heard so many things going off when they blasted that's probably when they loosened it. And then it was a really wet spring, and the rock was sliding down. Mother was dead, and so my father had to evacuate. And lots of people offered him a bed, but he wouldn't take it. So he went and slept on the divan at the Masonic Temple, and got up 2 or 3 times and looked to see if the rock was still there. And he called me and he said, "Now, what do I do about Mother's china closet?" And I said, "You leave it right there. If the rock comes down, then that's what happens. If the rock doesn't come down, then I'll someday get it." But we're not going to worry about it now. Just you stay out. Well, he went home. He changed his clothes 3 or 4 times a day. He'd always get dressed for breakfast, put a tie on, and then he'd come home and put on overalls and run some concrete or paint a room or do something. And then he'd have to run to a luncheon meeting. So he'd get dressed again and a suit and a tie. And he had fishing ties and painting ties. And I never saw him without a tie, except in the hospital in his pajamas. He always had a tie. And so at his funeral, I brought all his ties out.
And you were telling me earlier your father had passed away in 1999.
Yes. 1 week after my husband passed away. So it was a bad year.
Did he pass in Colorado Springs?
No, my husband got to get home.
Like
My father passed away in his apartment.
Okay.
He was living across the street from his house, and he was living upstairs. And all my kids got to be there when he was real sick, and they all came up for my husband. And so then I said, we've got to. My husband died on a Sunday, and we couldn't have a funeral till Wednesday.
Right.
And so then I called my minister and I said, "We're going to have it on Saturday." She said, "You can't. It's the patrons' ball for the big museum." And my husband had worked there so many years. And I said, "Look, my kids have been out of school and out of work for a long time. If you can preach, if the singer can sing, and if my circle can fix some food, we'll have it on Saturday." And we had 300 and some people there. I don't know, for Grandpa, did we have 400 and some? It was his was in the mausoleum, and my husband's was in our church. And so, yeah, it was a lot of people. Then I had to get home and get back to Colorado and empty his apartment. So we didn't have to pay rent on it anymore. And my daughter helped me go over to La Forêt, where I was married. That was my 48th anniversary. So she went with me, so I wasn't alone. And that was like 5 days after all the funerals.
Well, okay. Well, Bettie Marie, we thank you again for taking the time to interview with us today. We're interviewing you in connection with the Manitou Springs Heritage Center's Oral History Project. And you are actually our first interviewee, so you're the guinea pig.
I think Manitou Springs was a wonderful place to grow up. And it had so many things, and it was so special. Lots of places to hike, lots of places to ride horses, lots of places to do things. The Garden of the Gods was so special to me. I've been out there and with a bicycle, with a foot, I went to the Easter sunrise services every year. And excuse me. So I'm sure that everybody that's there is very lucky.
We are. We still feel lucky living in Manitou Springs. There's plenty to do, plenly of hiking.
And there's a lot of new things down there. You have such things as the coffin races.
Yeah.
And
crazy stuff.
And
crazy stuff going on.
What are the Christmas cake throw?
Yes, that would be the fruitcake toss.
The fruitcake toss, yeah.
Yes, that's a lot of fun. And then we also have a carnival. And, it's basically a Rocky Mountain Mardi Gras. So,
well, I don't think we had any of those when I was growing up, but they sound like fun.
Yeah, all these things had been started within the last 25 years or so.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's great fun for everyone. So come on
Yeah,
out
I
to
think,
Manitou.
I
again.
think the primary things they did back then was dinners and stuff to earn money and sales, rocket, like white elephant sales and things like that. Didn't take as much money to do much then.
It does now.
Yeah.
All right, we'll go ahead and wrap this up, and we thank you again, Bettie Marie,
For being the guinea pig.
for being the guinea pig today, our first interviewee with the Oral History series. And we're speaking again to Bettie Marie Sharpton Daniels here in Cody, Wyoming. And thank you again, Bettie Marie. Thank
You're
you
welcome.
for having us, inviting us into your home and talking to us about the old Manitou.
I love the old Manitou.
We do too. So, and we try to present that every chance we get at the Manitou Springs Heritage Center. So let's see. Okay, that's it. Pretty good.
It's enough.
You wanna stop?
So you're on the cloud?